what's a just society? He said a just society is a society, if you knew everything about it, you would be willing to enter it in a random place. You might be very rich, you might be very poor. So think about the US, some very, very rich people, lots of people who have almost no money, right? The bottom 40% have basically zero. Would you be willing to enter the US in a random place, or would you pick Sweden? Most Americans, let me pick Sweden if I'm going to. He called this the veil of ignorance. He said, you pick which country you go in before you know where you'll be in the distribution. If you're very rich, you might want the US. If you're very poor, you might want Sweden. But he said, that's not justice. Justice is you have to think about all the perspectives.
The study of why people act the way they act is called behavioral economics. As you might imagine, it's a field that attracts psychologists and humanitarians and dictators alike. Anyone interested in influencing or predicting the movements of a usually irrational population. Leading books in the field include The Honest Truth About Dishonesty and Predictably Irrational and Payoff and Dollars and Cents. These are Dan Ariely's books, and there are several more, which is probably why he's frequently called to consult with some of the world's top leaders. As a behavioral economics nerd, I've read them all, and I'm a fan of Dan. So of course I read Dan's latest book, Misbelief, about how normal people of all kinds of political persuasions can be sucked into extremist conspiracy holes and then be unable to accept obvious reality, all the while claiming that everyone who disagrees with them is unable to accept obvious reality. As you might know, I've practically dedicated my life to anti-extremism, rationality, and empathy. So I was ready to love the book. And then Dan challenged some of my own pet beliefs that were, of course, based in obvious reality. But the one thing I love more than being right is learning how I was wrong, as long as it doesn't require me to say something that I don't actually believe or admit to a revelation that I haven't really had. And so it was with that spirit that I had the great privilege of challenging the challenger of my ideas, the world-changing behavioral economist, Dan Ariely.
There's a lot of reasons that we lose trust. And so it was a challenge to have the emotion of being told, well, the reason you don't trust perhaps is because you're stressed out or because, you haven't gotten enough sleep or whatever the reasons are, that like that's your thing, that's your problem. And this is a thing that you've fallen down the rabbit hole of.
I did not try to say it's your problem. I tried to say that to a large degree it's a social problem. For example, when I talk about resilience, I think the information, but yes, I think there's lots of things that take us into very undesirable pathways. Lots of, so tell me about you. So in what way do you feel that you've gone down the rabbit hole?
Well, of course, no one who's in the rabbit hole thinks that they are, and so I'm open to
but I understand, of course.
The fact that perhaps I'm farther down than I think I am. But it seems to me that a lot of us were lied to, and in a relationship, especially in a relationship where there's authority, when you are lied to and then lied to about the lying, and then told that you're some version of evil for questioning the lying, that deteriorates trust in a way that can't necessarily be fixed by like just trying to trust harder,
That's right. And the book was about it wasn't about both sides. It was about one side.
Sure, yeah, that's fair.
But yes, it is true that there's a lot to write about the other side as well, right? So there's a certain belief in the way that information should flow, certain desire for obedience. So it's very, very complex.
Yeah.
But I did write it about one side,
right?
And I wrote it about the psychology of that side. I did not try to eventually say that I know exactly what is correct and not correct. I just try to quantify and observe the psychology that creates this change. But very good. You're very welcome to challenge me and so on. It's And I appreciate that, even though um you're on the side of the people who maybe think that I created evil, that you're open to reading and thinking. It's very nice.
Well, yeah, and I'm definitely not like I'm a fan of yours, so I'm not at all on the side that thinks that you're evil. And the beginning of the book felt like I was very much with you when you were talking about like I don't know where these like I had these friends and then they started believing these things about me and I don't know
Yeah,
where it came from. I'm curious about how they could get there, and I love that. Like I was fully emotionally on board with like having an experience that most people would get defensive about and instead getting curious about it. And that's one of my favorite things about you and your work is just the level of curiosity that you have in situations where most people would have many other emotions. And so that, but then when it turned into the thing about government, like that's that's where I felt like okay, but my assumption about Dan and who he is and what he says and what he thinks. And when I bring it to Dan and I'm like, Dan, this is what you think and this is who you are. And Dan says, oh, that's not what I think. That's not who I am. At that point, it's on me to change my frame of reference. But when I've got an authority that lies to me repeatedly, and then for them to go, why don't you just trust what's wrong with you? How come you become a conspiracy theorist? Like,
yeah,
well, I feel like that's not on me. So I feel like there's a change of topic there.
yeah. But that just was out of the scope. But you're absolutely right. So one of the things that happen is that imagine that you're not trusted. Um, how would you fix that? Or imagine that you made a mistake. How would you fix that? And the sad thing is that fixing it is not how people intuitively work. So, for example, if you've made a mistake, let's say you've made a mistake in your relationship with me. Let's say we have a relationship and you made a mistake. Um, the right way to do it would be to admit the mistake, to say I'm sorry about this, and let me just tell you that from now on I'll be better. Um, and I will certainly be disappointed that you made a mistake before and so on. But I think people have the capacity for trust. And when was the last time that an organization was willing to do that? Right? There's a story on Tylenol that there was some mistakes in Tylenol and they recalled the whole thing and made a huge reputation for themselves on safety. But it's very hard to admit mistakes. Very hard to admit mistakes. Now, not only that, but social media and information being misused makes it even worse. So I don't know if you paid attention to one part of this where I went to an editor of a journal, of a newspaper, and I said, there are side effects that are not being reported. And I said, what do you think about reporting them? And my whole attempt was to say, let's become more truthful, let's build trust. And what was his answer? If I'll report this, the information will be misused on the other side. And so this is the thing that I think we live in a society where people are not willing to admit mistakes. I think people think short term versus long term. I think people are afraid that things that they will say will be edited and cut and taken out of context and so on. And all of this, by the way, people are also correct in
Oh yeah.
assuming, but it creates a terrible escalation of mistrust. So imagine we're at the period of a beginning of COVID-26. Let's just
Yep.
say.
Okay. Sure.
Let's just imagine something like this.
It better not happen, or people are gonna clip this like crazy.
Yeah. You heard it first here. So let's say something like this starts, and let's say the government makes a mistake in the beginning. Let's say it's a mistake with how they think the virus is transmitted, or whether gloves are important or not, or something like that. And then they realize that they're wrong. it takes a really brave person to say we're wrong. Let me explain to you how, because you can imagine how everybody will take those few words, and so people can justify it. I think people don't want to admit mistakes. It's painful. And then a lot of the way that social media is acting is making it harder. So I think when we talk about the crisis of trust, it's not just a crisis of we don't trust each other. It's a crisis of how in this day and age mistrust is being created and how difficult it is to stop the wave.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like we've got a sufficient path towards redemption or something like that.
Exactly. When was the last time somebody in a big way say, you know what, I was really wrong?
Yeah, well, and when they do, like you said, what are the consequences of that? Like you don't get rewarded, at least not in the short term, for that. And interpersonally, social media aside, you don't get usually immediately rewarded for that either. But it feels like there is a path forward. You can stay in a community as the liar or as the whatever or as the offender, and then build trust with that community. But when you are on the internet, like you can get cast out of a community and you're not there to build the trust anymore. So then what are your
So
thoughts?
imagine that tomorrow somebody finds a picture of you with Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay.
And you haven't done anything bad. You had no idea. You met him at the party.
Okay, so in your situation, I did meet him. Yes.
Okay.
No, I'm
You did
asking.
meet him. It's
Okay,
not.
okay.
It's not fake. But
Okay.
you met him at the party. You haven't done anything inappropriate, and you had no idea that anything was
Sure.
wrong.
Yeah.
What are the chances that somebody could benefit dramatically, or the internet will benefit, or negative news could benefit from this, and your reputation will just be destroyed for doing nothing? Now imagine that you wanted to apologize. So you know what, I had no idea. He lived in my neighborhood. We met for coffee. Like, it's really hard. It's really hard. We have become a society that focuses on negativity. We can talk a little bit about why. Cancel culture is a hobby of people. When people get negative things, nobody wants to stand in their favor. By the way, from the time that I was accused, I was accused of being the chief architect of the cabal for
Yes. Now, when you say the chief architect, like I literally had no idea that this was a thing. I know that this was probably like an all-consuming thing in your life. In my life, this never happened to you
Of course,
because I just
of course.
enjoy your books.
Yeah.
So, like, to
Yeah.
what extent was this like? Were there other people that were as high up as you, or like did
Oh,
people
yeah,
think
yeah.
that
I
you
mean,
were the?
no, I was the chief. So in many ways, this was a compliment. So the this is not a huge group. It's not hundreds of thousands of people. It's a small group that attacked me, but very maliciously, death threats. I mean, it was very, very tough, and they really hated me, and they really took it to task. But but what they said was, how could it be that people are so compliant? So you must have helped them. So what's so interesting? I didn't write about this, but are you in a relationship?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you probably know that you can get really offended by somebody you love in a way that you would never get offended by somebody else.
Yeah. Right.
Right? Like somebody you love, like forgets to take the cup out of the sink, and oh my goodness, how could you do this? Like, people get upset by people that we love much more than by the random person. Everything can become personal. Not a good human trait, but it's one that we have. And I think that the people who started really attacking me were people who really liked me. So these are people who read my books, thought I was a good researcher, liked my ideas, And what they said was that how could it be that so many people in so many countries are so compliant? It must be that I helped them. Now my research is not on that topic, but people send me pictures of burning my books. It was very, very intense. But I think it was the people who started it, or the people who were offended that I wasn't on their side. They also were willing to talk to me because I was important to them, and they were hoping to change my opinion
Huh. Okay.
about that.
They were trying to
Uh,
change your opinion about it.
Yeah.
To get you
Yeah.
to admit that you were what they thought you were.
No, even not to admit, to agree that there was a pandemic.
Yeah, right.
So they wanted me to convert me to their belief. But I also wrote about a guy who gave me ivermectin. He really, like, he was one of my attackers, but he gave me ivermectin because he really cared. So it was very, very interesting. Now I'm still in touch with a few of them. Um, it's tough relationship because I don't blame them. I understand the process. I understand they were in this, what I call the funnel of misbelief, but they created for me a lot of pain. You said, and I appreciated that I turned it into curiosity, but it's not as if I didn't feel the other feelings. It was a very, very difficult, turbulent period. I'm very proud that I managed to come out with more curiosity and less of the other things. But it's not as if I didn't have those other things. So I'm still in touch with them. It's tough for me. It's tough for me because I don't want to tell them, look, you really made my life miserable for about 2 years, and some of it initially with higher intensity, later with lower intensity. Um, some of them now really don't think that I had anything to do with it. In retrospect, um, but nobody is saying it publicly. Again, why? Admitting mistakes, uh, and so on. So I think that we live in a world in which nobody wants to admit mistakes, and it's a really bad recipe for progress.
Well, and just in relationship too, it feels like um all of the not maybe not to the same extent, but the feelings that you're expressing about, you caused me pain, um legitimately or otherwise, they're feeling the same way about you. Like, you caused me a lot of pain. Like, there's a lot of
Yep.
betrayal, and like, again, legitimately or not, like,
Yeah.
Dan Ariely, like, he caused my life pain, a lot of pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if he didn't do the all of that stuff, just still like that. It maybe in their imagination, you
Yeah.
you had an extremely negative effect on their life. And I feel like that's the difficult part in the relationships, is trying to hold a space for the other person to feel the things that they feel when their reaction to those feelings are what is causing you the pain.
Yeah. There's a beautiful analysis of the Irish and how they managed to solve the conflict between the Catholic and the Protestants. And the kind of term that is so important in that is called equity of esteem. And when you have one side that looks down at the other side, you can't move forward. You can't move forward. And they basically said, we have to have this, not just mutual respect, equity of esteem, like holding somebody in this. And Nelson Mandela took that seriously from them and brought it to South Africa and to the Truth and Reconciliation Act and so on. I think it's unbelievably important. And I think that we don't have enough of that. Actually, we have very little of that. Think in the US, Republicans versus Democrats. No. Everywhere else in the world, actually, it just does that. But we're really at a period that there is this disregard to the other side and disrespect, and you show it. For example, when Macron said that the French people who are not taking the vaccine are not French. Like, what did he think will happen the next day? So, oh, you're saying I'm not French. Let me now embrace this vaccine. No, when we are rejected, we just feel more isolated and we attack back. That's the human nature. It's a very bad cycle. It's a very bad cycle, but revenge causes revenge, as mistrust causes mistrust, and attacking it feels like we're in a constant fight. Like, when was the last time you were in a discussion that was truly trying to understand a new truth?
Yeah.
Very hard.
Very
Most of
difficult.
it's like as if people are in front of an imaginary judge, or fighting against each other, defending their position. All the discussions were like that. What about this? No, no. Let's figure out. Like, the truth is tough. It's tough. It's complex. And by the way, with COVID, population science is really tough. I'm very lucky. I do lab experiments. Lab experiments are easy. I take 200 people, randomly assign some here, randomly assign some here, and now statistically they're not different from each other, and any difference is just because of what I did to them. When you talk about population science, it's really tough. People do lots of things, right? So just think about sugar versus fat. For how long we thought that fat was evil and sugar was great, and it's not because the sugar monopoly was. It's just difficult to figure out. Or smoking. We figure out that smoking is unhealthy, but how long it took us? It's because you can't do the randomized control trial. Say, hey, these 100 people smoke, these 100 people don't smoke. Let's see what happened to you in 20 years, or with fat and sugar. So population science is always very, very tough. Lots of room for mistakes, very complex. And even, let's say, people that get vaccinated. Vaccine is never 100%. But if they feel they're protected, they will take more risk. In the same that people that have anti-lock brakes drive faster and take more risk. So it's very. There was a physicist that once said that, think about how complex physics would be if atoms could think and act. This is psychology. We have this unit called people, and they can think and act, and they take their own decisions. So. And I also think that from the beginning, in something like COVID, we should have said, the government should have said, this is really tough. We don't know. We have no idea. Airborne, not, we don't know. Here is where it looks currently, and we might change our mind later. So we should have set the standard from the beginning. But people are so gang-ho about, let's have simple rules, yes, no, good, bad, and so on. And admitting that you don't know just was frightening to them. So anyway, I think there were so many things that went wrong with this. I'll give you another example. I don't remember if I wrote about it. I didn't write about this at the end. And in Sweden, people have a very different sense of obligation to society. So you wake up in the morning, forget COVID or not. You wake up in the morning, your kids are coughing and with fever. Do you send them to school or not? In Sweden, you don't. And it comes from lots of reasons. But you say, I don't want to infect other people. I don't want my kids to infect other people. And my work is important, but my work also allows me enough days off. So I can take a day off. It's not just caring, it's also caring and being able to do it. In the US, you wake up in the morning, your kids are sick. You have like 3 days off a year. I'm exaggerating, but you have almost no days off a year, and you have almost no sick days, and people who are on part-time have zero. And now what you do? You send your kids to school because you have no other option. Is it because you don't care about people? No, the system. First of all, you care less, and the system is not allowing you to do what's right. Um, and now the government knows that if we say, "Hey, if your kids wake up in the morning and they have fever, don't send them to school," it would not work out in other countries because they can't comply. Well, anyway, these are very complex systems where poverty plays a role, and mistrust plays a role, and capacity plays a role, and the U.S. was not set up to handle a crisis like this, and sadly, I think it's even set up in a worse way these days. Imagine we had COVID 2026, we're worse off.
Well, yes, and I feel like that's in large part their fault. So, I mean,
I agree.
there's no apparatus that I can trust. I want to trust an apparatus. I want information. I'm curious. I'm open, but also I know that I already did this once, and the only person I can't trust for sure is the people that lied to me and then lied to me about the lying and then called me evil for calling them liars.
Yeah.
So,
And I think you're right, not because of the way you expressed it, but I think you're right because the government has higher responsibility, right? When you ask the question of who needs to take the first step into solving the trust problem, I think it shouldn't be the citizens. I think it should be the government. Okay, so trust was broken, lots of bad things happened. We can tell the story of why. I think it was mostly um, good intentions with naive psychology and some wishful thinking and some not paying and being stressed with time and all kinds of things. I don't think it was evil. I think it was a combination of not thinking about psychology, not appreciating the way people were experiencing COVID and all kinds of things like that. Um, but no matter what it is, nobody's taking a real effort to fix it. Right? I think we should like imagine there was a national inquiry. Let's get all the things that were wrong and what are the lessons and how's the next. How are we going to handle the next pandemic or the next disaster? Incredibly important to do. But sadly, nobody is taking this very seriously. I'll tell you one other thing. There was a wonderfully interesting and sad book about the impact of the opioid epidemic on the first Trump election. The findings were that the number of people who overdosed from opioids predicted switches from blue states to red states. And you say, how does this happen? Like, what's the link? So think about the following. Imagine you have an aunt that has a hip replacement, and she's fine. A wonderful aunt, great person, goes for hip replacement, gets the hip replacement, and gets some painkillers. Gets addicted to painkillers, things get worse, gets more of them, they stop the medication. She gets drugs off the street, let's say fentanyl, becomes a drug addict, eventually dies from overdose. What do you do at that moment? You stop trusting, right? You say, my aunt had a hip replacement. She trusted the healthcare system. She came out of it as a drug addict that had to buy drugs on the streets. Now, how do you explain this? Now, and there were lots of those people, very, very sad. Lots of those people that were really betrayed by the system. And you could see how they took this as a betrayal by the system. Um, by the way, that analysis, the first Trump election was very close. That analysis suggested that without the opioid epidemic, Trump would have not been elected in the first time. Just look at the number of counties that were switched. But I think we dramatically underestimate the role of trust and how fragile it is. I'll give you one more example. When COVID started, I approached some friends who worked in pharma. And I said, look, I know that your scientists are going to be working day and night trying to figure this out. Some will succeed, some will not. I say it will be a true mission, probably for a scientist, like for a scientist that works in viruses. This was a marathon. Uh, these are people that spend. I'm not talking. I mean, forget the CEO of a company. Think about the bench scientists that all their lives are trying to fight different viruses, and all of a sudden there's a virus that seems to be spreading around the world. Like that's your
This
that's
your
your
day has come.
Superman moment. That's your
Yeah.
day. These are people that were not going to sleep. They're going to move to the office. This is like it's the moment where everything you learned is coming to a test. Like I don't know what you imagine about your moment of equivalent to like that to be. By the way, for me, COVID was similar. To me, COVID was similar. But before people started attacking me, when COVID started, I started getting lots of questions. Yes, fines, no fines. How do you get people to learn from a distance? How do you reduce domestic violence? I felt that all what I learned from social science was coming to this new era that nobody knew what to do. I had two phones, and I was on the phone with anybody who wanted. I stopped doing everything. I just was trying to give advice about, like the minister of police in one country calls me and say, yes, fine, no fines, big fines, small fines. And I said, no, try not to do fines, try to do rewards, long term, not big. Anyway, but lots of things like that. Reducing domestic violence. In some places, domestic violence went up by 900%. So anyway, I felt I was cold, but those brain scientists much more than me. So I called a few people up and I said, why don't we start videoing that? I know it's COVID. I know, just get some cameras, start filming, and nobody had the bandwidth to do it.
I'm sorry, to film what? To film the discussions or?
No, to film the heroic effort of the bench scientists.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Trying and failing and succeeding and the steps and so on. Like, look, let's just imagine how it looked like. There were these people who were just day and night, not going home, eating at work, sleeping at work, doing tests. It was really an unbelievable effort by lots and lots of people to try and figure this out. Right now, you can probably imagine what would be the footage like. Right, these will be people who are, dropping everything. It's a truly heroic story that we never got to see. What I thought in the beginning was this will be an unbelievable, heroic, untold story, and nobody had the energy to do that, or the patience and so on. But eventually, at the end of COVID, some of my friends in pharma say that they feel that people dislike them more, and they feel that that they if they go to lunch they take their tags off. Sometimes I think it's a real shame. It's a real shame. I think if people thought about the scientists and what they were trying to do and what they succeeded and fails and what theories they had and so on, it was really an unbelievable story of attempt to conquer science, and there were I mean, just the sheer energy that was dedicated to this is it's just amazing.
I feel like it's so much harder too when there is a system behind the individuals. Like, with the medical system, like I might like all the nurses that I interact with, but also if I've got, in the end, ultimately a negative outcome, especially if, it has to do with insurance or whatever else, like there's just like, there's so much frustration and anger and all kinds of negative emotions and nowhere to point them to, because everyone you call, they say, oh, well, that's that you're mad at a different building.
So couple of things on that. That's really important. First of all, I think that explaining the reason really helps. right? So, so if let's say you have a car and it breaks down, and you give it to the mechanics, and they don't do anything, and they don't do anything, don't do anything, and it takes a long time. You get pissed off. But if they explain why they don't do anything, they say, look, you have a really unique car, and it's a unique situation, and we're looking at it, and we send the information to the factory, and we haven't got it back, and we're waiting. You would say, okay, I mean, the outcome is the same, but I'm less pissed off. So I think explaining things is important. Explaining things is important. It's not just about the outcome. It's not just about the outcome. We're also upset with the process. If we go back to the discussion that you're upset with your significant other leaves a cup in the sink, it's also not about the outcome. It's about the process. You say, "Oh, I'm imagining that you didn't care about me. I told you before." Okay, so, the other thing that is very important. I have a website where I complain about bureaucracy. It's called the Center for Advanced Bureaucracy. I do videos of disappointment with bureaucracy. And I teach at University called Duke in North Carolina, and we are unbelievably good at bureaucracy, and we're getting much better. Not in a good way, but terrible bureaucracy. Um, I think too many universities are going into being managed by lawyers rather than by academics, and for not the right reasons. Um, but we had this incident. There's a process. So I have lots of people who are not U.S. citizens who come to work with us, and they come on a visa, of course. And it's important to have people from other countries because we work with other countries. Like we have people from Colombia. We have projects on poverty in Colombia. We have um, and the university has this thing that they have to go once a year back to their home country and renew their visa. But when they go back to their home country to renew their visas, they have to take days off, vacation days. Now, the US has very few vacation days. It's not Europe. So, and sometimes it takes them longer to get their visas than the amount of, let's say they have 14 days off. First of all, they should be able to take their vacation whenever they want, but they have to keep it for going to renew their visa. And then if the U.S. embassy is slow, they have to go on unpaid leave because they run out of. So they how do you treat people like this? They don't have vacation. Like vacation is supposed to be rejuvenating. It's not. It's some right. It's a right. Like people should have days off. And you tell these people, Duke tells these people, you can't have vacation. You have to use your vacation to go back and renew your visa. And not only do you have to do that, but if you run out of days off, you're going to go on unpaid leave. And then when you come back, it takes some time to go back on payroll. And, it's a crazy system. And I was really pissed off with that. Terribly pissed off with it. And I tried to fight. By the way, I failed. But I tried to fight it. And as I was fighting it, I was thinking, this is terrible. It really is terrible. But my level of being pissed off with that is not proportional to how terrible it is. Like there's lots of terrible things in the world. Why is this one pissing me off so much? And it got me thinking back to what I learned about domestic violence during COVID. So when I did this project on trying to reduce domestic violence with COVID, domestic violence went up against women, but mostly against children. And we were trying to, we came up with some programs to try and fight it. But what I learned about domestic violence is that for kids, it's not just the physical aspect. What it is that they get beaten up by somebody they look up to, by somebody who's supposed to protect them. So, if you compare, kid X gets into trouble with kid Y and gets beaten up by level Z versus kid X gets beaten by the same level by their parents, very different story, right? It's the person you depend on the most is now a source of violence rather than a source of support. Plus, the support that they had with school teachers goes down. Anyway, terrible. Like, it was so sad just to kind of realize that. And anyway, what I started understanding is that bureaucracy within my university feels very much like violence from a parent that is supposed to protect me. These people are here to work for Duke. They're here to work here, where you're supposed to be our parent. You're supposed to help these people. You're not supposed to hurt. You're not a terrorist organization that is attacking. You're not. You're supposed to be on our side. How can it be? And if we generalize this, I think it's the same thing about the government. When you say you are my government, you were elected by us. You were elected to protect us. This is like, how can it be that this is gone? So if you go back to the question of who should apologize first, the people on the government, there's lots of reasons to think it's the government, but one of them is that the betrayal by the government was much worse. Forget the level of intensity, because the expectation from the government is like the expectation from the parent to be there on our side. And when it's not happening, it's very, very tough.
Well, and if, in my own experience with my own friends, I feel like it was more radicalizing for the people who believed the most in the government, and particularly, my Democrat friends got turned more right than my right-wing friends got turned right, because they were kind of already there anyway. But also there was just a huge amount of this betrayal of like, wait, so I trusted you, and then I obeyed you, and then you, like, what you're saying is just this is not supposed to happen.
It's the same thing as you love somebody, you depend on them, and so on. There's an obligation that comes with that position. Yeah. Now, the facts are so murky, and what really happened, we so much don't know, right? But I do think that I wish there was some real investigation into what happened and what were the decisions and where things went wrong, and when did we lose trust, and what could we have done to gain trust, and pitting people against each other, not a good strategy. I mean, not a good long-term strategy for anybody.
Yeah, well, and I don't feel like politicians in general are incentivized to have a long-term strategy, because they've got to get reelected and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I feel like the more fundamental, or at least the more accomplishable goal, is that we renew our trust in each other. Because I feel like even if there was a major investigation by some neutral third party, like, who's going to trust them? Like, whatever side they come up for. Oh, go ahead.
I disagree. I think we could come up with a mechanism of people that we would trust. So let me give you some hope.
Cool. I'd love it.
So a few years ago, I wrote to all my Greek friends, and I say, I'm expecting an apology. I said, you brought us democracy, you made all these promises, it's not working well. Say you're sorry. I know you didn't mean it, but just say you're sorry. Anyway, so my Greek friends, it was all one email. They wrote back. One of them wrote back and said, did you read much about Greek democracy? And I said, no. I said, go back, read, and come back to us. So I went to read about Greek democracy, and Greek democracy is really kind of amazing. Greeks loved politics. They didn't like politicians. Greek democracy came as against a layer of the rulers. They didn't want rulers. They want the people to rule. And what they used was randomness. So if you remember, all the citizens of Athens, at that time, no women and no slaves, but okay, that we can make that better, would show up and they would randomly pick who was going to be a judge for the day. Now, think about what it means. It means if you're going to be the judge, tomorrow you might be judged. You have to think about all the perspectives. Have you heard about the philosopher John Rawls?
By name, but I don't know. I couldn't quote any ideas.
John Rawls had this very famous book called Theory of Justice. And in this book, he says, what's a just society? He said, a just society is a society, if you knew everything about it, you would be willing to enter it in a random place. You might be very rich, you might be very poor. So think about the US, some very, very rich people, lots of people who have almost no money, right? The bottom 40% have basically zero. Would you be willing to enter the US in a random place, or would you pick Sweden? Most Americans, let me pick Sweden if I'm going to. He called this the veil of ignorance. He said, you pick which country you go in before you know where you'll be in the distribution. If you're very rich, you might want the US. If you're very poor, you might want Sweden. But he said, that's not justice. Justice is you have to think about all the perspectives. Now, so John Rawls, it's a thought experiment. It's a thought experiment about what is a just society if I have to think about all perspectives. The Greeks practiced it. They used randomness. They created random tribes and they remixed them from time to time, all kinds of things. You know, in the same way that Burning Man sometimes randomly get people to be in different places and so on. So randomness is a really wonderful mechanism to get people to consider all perspective. Okay, that idea went away. And a few years ago, about 12, it came back in Ireland. It came back in what is called citizen committees. The Irish had two big challenges: gay rights and abortion rights. Now, Catholic, Protestants, really tough. And politicians today have to be extreme and they can't compromise. Like, I'm imagining that many years ago they would sit, nobody would know what they're talking about, they could compromise. Now everything they do is on Instagram immediately, or TikTok or X, whatever. They can't compromise and become more extreme. So they picked, I think, about 300 people, like a jury, and they said, you people are going to study the topic. You're going to start by talking to each other, understanding your own perspectives. You're going to be randomly sampled from the country. And you have time. You don't have to worry. You have time. And after you finish discussing it among yourself, we'll help you invite experts. And at the end, you will write your decision about what you think the country should vote. And there will be a referendum. And this is what they did. And they voted for gay rights and for abortion rights like 12 years ago. And since then, more and more places are using citizen committees. In the US, I think California is trying to introduce it, some other places. And every place they introduce it, it comes out well. Now, the people who study Brexit said Brexit would have never happened, right? Because people would study and know and so on. So we are not trusting our politicians. I think citizen committees, I think we would trust, right? So I do. So anyway, I love citizen committees. I think it's a really important thing. I think citizens committees can compromise where politicians can't. I think they have time to study things in details, to understand each other's perspective, which also politicians can't. And I think they could have the trust of the people in a way that politicians don't have. So I really think of it as a possibility for the next phase of democracy, is to bring citizen committees for more things.
It feels like that depends on our ability to trust each other on a lower level, which I feel like that is actively being eroded also. So that's part of the beauty of, especially the last chapters in your book that I felt, was like that call to, well, even from the beginning, you were like, if you disagree with someone, if they seem crazy to you, still don't ostracize them, because that's going to make the situation worse. And then at the end of the book, it's about, how to rebuild trust with at least your neighbor. If you can't do it hierarchically very far up the chain, at least let's try to see the humanity in each other, because without that.
Yeah. So I a few years ago, I'm Jewish, and a few years ago I opened a website that I'm trying to understand anti-Semitism, and I get people apply to talk to me, and some people nominate. and I have what's called Chatham House rules.
Yeah.
Chatham House rules is that you can say what you learned, but you can't say from who you learned it, and there's no quotes. Um, so all of the discussions are Chatham House rules, and I have one or two of those a week. Of course, since the beginning of the war in the south of Israel with Gaza, and these are very useful discussions. I hope that everybody I talk to feels respected. I don't belittle them. I want to understand how they reached their decisions. And I think the training I had with talking to people who hated me so strongly during COVID was a really good practice for this. Now, I'm talking to, you know, I don't even talk to 100 people a year. I'm not going to make a dent in anti-Semitism, but it is the thing that I am getting from it is that it is possible to identify people who define themselves as anti-Semites. I don't talk to anti-Zionists. I don't talk to people who have criticism to the Israeli government. I just say, I'm focusing on people that are defining themselves as anti-Semitic. And there's a way to have a discussion. Do you believe where you got your beliefs? Would something might change your beliefs? Where do you see this is going? I mean, there's lots of things to have a conversation once you. I'm not hating you. It's not this. It's let's talk about the opinions, the ideas. I really think that basically saying we're trying to come up to a new understanding is kind of the key rather than trying to defend our position.
Well, and I feel like so much of that too, the mistrust, maybe the misbelief, is based also in a sense of one, betrayal, but also not being seen or not being heard. And when a person feels like they have been seen or heard, I feel like a lot of their opinions dissolve or are more malleable.
Yeah.
And that lack of being able to validate each other's perspective from their perspective. Like, Dan may not have actually caused somebody else harm, but for Dan to be able to look at someone and see, I can see from your perspective, the character of Dan in your life has caused you harm, even though I didn't intend to.
And I don't have to say it's me. It could be, I'm really sorry for what you've been going through. I know it's been hard. Like to basically saying, and I think it's unfair. Like, just coming with the perspective saying, I know you're suffering, and I know you've been handed a bad hand, and I think it's a shame and it's terrible. And let's just start the discussion by saying, I'm really sorry for you. I'm really sorry that this is happening. Just acknowledge the suffering, on the unneeded suffering on the other side is okay. You don't have, like, we agree on that. We agree that there's a lot of unneeded suffering on both sides, and I think it's true for almost every debate that we have, that there is real unneeded suffering on both sides. Take the pro-life versus pro-choice. We're treating people on the other side as if they're inhumane, as if something is broken in them. By the way, if we were born to a slightly different family, we would have had those decisions, those opinions. Exactly. It's amazing. Like, one of the things I try to emphasize in the book is that we think that our opinions are well articulated and well reasoned and so on. And the moment you dig a little bit deep, you say, well, where is this coming from? Like, I say that I talk to lots of I'm on the left, so almost all of my friends are believing that global warming is one of the biggest issue around. And I talk to people. I say, how sure you are and how confident. And then I say, and what have you read? And most people say the UN report. And you say, have you really read the UN report? Not really. Maybe the abstract. Right. I read about it. And so much of it is about trust and trust and trust and opinions. And we do need to be a little bit less opinionated and more respective. And so going back to pro-life and pro-choice, both sides are are being ostracized. Both sides feeling hurt and unheard and not paying attention to, and we're not going to move forward like this.
Well, and the scariest part of it to me is the level to which even association with some group that I don't like means I already know everything there is to know about you. To the extent that, like, I can't tell anybody who I voted for because they're not going to know why I voted for that person, and they're going to hate. Like, there's 50% of the population is going to hate me for ever having voted that way, no matter how I vote. And there's no good reason, and so that part right there is the part that seems scariest to me. That, like, there's not a place to have an opinion and express it without it seems like an increasingly large group of people jumping on you, assuming they already know your intentions about it. So
one piece of hope. So I had a student who is vegan, and he said people hate vegans and they think they're judgmental and so on. So we did an experiment on this, and it's true. People think vegans are judgmental and pretentious and so on. But he found out that if you tell people up front that you're vegan for health reasons, they put you out of that category of being judgmental and so on. So I think there are some ways. We could think about what it means about voting, but I think there are some ways to say, let me not tell you the action because that creates so much this. Let me just tell you the reasons first, and it could mute some of the negativity.
Overall, would you say that you are optimistic about our ability to renew trust in each other and our systems?
So I think that if we wanted to, we could. And wanted, I mean that somebody would pay attention to it, and I think the answer is yes. Historically, it's kind of amazing people's ability to forgive. We have the Catholic Confession, we have the Jewish Day of Atonement, we have the Truth and Reconciliation Act, we have the issue with the rebels in Colombia with the referendum. I think we have the capacity. We have the capacity to open a new page, but we need a process. It will not happen by itself. So is humanity capable of opening a new page? Is the US capable of opening a new page? I think the answer is yes. Does our government has the insight that this is a sufficiently important topic? I think not yet. I think by the way, without trust, we're very unlikely to resolve any of our real problems. Education is not in great state. Infrastructure is not in great state. There's lots of things that we need to do. Without real engagement in trust, our odds of doing that is not very high.
And the trust to me seems just, maybe it's just our particular society, maybe it's just humanity in general. It seems inextricably linked to our tribalism, because it seems like we have almost infinite capacity to forgive almost any sin within our tribe, but the current climate is, once you commit a sin against one of my fundamental favorite pet peeves, whatever it is, then you're not in my tribe anymore, and there's somewhere else to put you. So we're not a tribe of, we're not a United States of America. We're individual conclaves of tribalism, and it seems like that is. The politicians have incentives to increase that, and as a society, it seems like that will be our ruin if we can't find a way to see each other as being a part of our own tribe.
I absolutely agree with you. So from that perspective, I will say thank you. You clearly, we clearly did not have the same opinions about what was happening during COVID, and you reached out, and I think it's wonderful. So I appreciate it.
Thank you all for joining me. For all the criticism that Dan has received over the years about his research or communication, or for being the Jew who orchestrated and executed the pandemic of COVID to control humanity through nanobots, I really enjoyed my conversation with him for many reasons. The biggest of which is his ability to empathize and stay engaged amidst strong criticism. That is harder than picking a side or defending a side. It's slower and messier and less comfortable. But if we're going to make it through this next century, I don't think it's going to be through the right people winning and the wrong people losing. It's going to be through the embodied knowledge that we're all the same people. Each one a mix of right and wrong, just distant cousins, who hopefully know that rooting for you is a way of rooting for me. So be well, because caring for you is the first step in caring for me. And I really wish that didn't sound so sappy, because if I'm really honest, I think it's actually true.